present the 2002 Engineering Achievement Awards, the Senior Vice President of NAB Science and Technology, Mr. Lynn Claudy.
For outstanding achievement in radio engineering, our honoree today is Paul Schafer. Paul Schafer has been in this business a very long time. He started his company, Schafer Electronics, in 1953 and was one of the original pioneers in the area of unattended operation of radio transmitters and radio station automation.
Folks, good morning. Four for the dome. And how you all doing?
We're doing good.
All right, that's it. That's a ticket.
I'm the father of automation, or the grandfather, or the great-grandfather, or whatever.
And what does that mean?
Of automation. I did it first. The radio station automation system is nothing more than a device that assembles a radio program. It takes this song and that announcement and something else, and it puts it together in a program form. Nowadays, it's much easier because you can do it with computers and so forth.
Start you off with a glass of Mum Brew Prestige to get this trip going for all of us. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, get you started. I need to let you know a few quick things about our menus as well, okay? First course today, you're all going to have a choice on soup or salad. Our soup du jour here today is lobster bisque.
So you have a thing about trains.
A thing about trains?
Right.
I like trains.
And you have a story about trains. And since you're on a train, you can tell us about trains.
You have a story about trains, dear.
One I can tell.
Oh, okay.
Well, the little town of Griffith, where I grew up, part of my life, had more railroad tracks in it, through it, than any other city in the world for population. I grew up in the Depression, and in order to be sure that you had a job and income, you went to work for, like, the railroad. My grandfather worked for the railroad. My father worked for the railroad. And because he had worked for the railroad more than 50 years before he died, he insisted that I try working for the railroad. Well, I tried, but I liked working in radio stations better. So I disappointed him until I was successful. And then he thought it was okay. When I started working for a radio station, it was a 250-watt radio station in Hammond, Indiana, where I played records, 78 RPM records. Radio at that time, if you were not a network station, if you didn't have CBS, NBC, ABC, or whatever, it was thought that you couldn't make a living in a radio station. So when in Fort Wayne, a station that I was working for, had to play records. That's all we could do. We could not get an affiliation with a network. And so it was the first time that we, or a station I was connected with, started to play music, because it didn't happen before. Before it was all networks. It was all the typical network programming, with the soap operas during the daytime and with the drama and at night. I, as the announcer operator, used to had an engineer operator on one side of the glass and an announcer on the other side of the glass. We were so poor that I said, I can do it, I'll do it both things. I'll work both sides of the glass. I'll go ahead and play the music and I'll do the announcing. And so we started, and I just played whatever music I wanted. I mean, I could be playing what would be considered the local rock or the Rhapsody in Blue, just whatever I felt like playing. And so but that was then the very beginning. So this would have been in the early 40s.
You were the artist and the
There was
program.
only one there.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, I would work 6 hours each morning and on the air, pick the music and do the stuff and read the commercials. And that was from 6 a.m. to noon. Then in the afternoon, from noon to 6 in the evening, I would go out and try to sell radio time. And then in the evening, I learned that I could sell sports. And we broadcast live baseball games of the Fort Wayne Daisies, a girls' baseball team that was, if you remember the movie with Madonna, A League of Their Own, well, that was the league. It was a lot of fun. On January the 2nd, 1951, I arrived in LA. I had the great pleasure of working at NBC Hollywood, Sunset and Vine, in those golden years of radio. I had the fun of working shows like The Bob Hope Show, whodunits like Dragnet, Night Beat.
I'll let the gentleman taste and see if he's
Only if you insist.
Yes.
Yes, he does.
My father's father, my grandfather, was the head of a wrecking crew for the greater Chicago area. So anytime, all he did was to stand by and wait, sitting in his platform rocker. And when the phone rang, he was the only one anyone knew had a private line, because when the railroad called, he got out of that platform rocker, contacted his crew, and they went out and got the train back on the track and got the tracks working again. So that was what my grandfather did a few years ago. Before I developed the program automation system, I developed a system to remotely control radio transmitters. So you didn't have to have poor guys sitting out in the country by the transmitter. You could control it remotely.
In 1955, the Schafer remote control system was used by NAB in field tests that were designed to show the viability of unattended remote control of transmitters. As a result of the considerable data from those tests that were filed by NAB in 1956, the FCC amended their rules to permit the remote control of all radio transmitters.
And having done that and sold a few of those things while I was still working for NBC Hollywood, a fella came to me who had bought one of my remote control systems. He owned this radio station in Bakersfield. His name is Dexter Haymond. And Dexter asked me to come up. I was living in LA at the time. Asked me to come up and talk to him about an idea he had. So I went up, we went out to dinner, and he said, "Paul, I have an idea." He said, with the remote control system, with a telephone operator at a telephone answering service, I could operate the radio station all night long without anyone there. And he said, there's a little 250-watt radio station in Bakersfield, California. He says, I couldn't afford to do that with people, but I could do it if you could make me a system that would automatically assemble the radio program. So I said, well, I guess we could take a Seaberg with a bunch of 45 RPM records and maybe 2 or 3.
And what's the Seaberg?
A Seaberg is like a jukebox. It was a jukebox that accommodated 100 45 RPM records. You remember 45 RPMs? They came right after the 78s. So I said, yeah, maybe with 2 or 3 tape recorders like Ampexes and one of these jukeboxes, we could have a system that would operate all night long without anybody there. I had, by then, retired from NBC, and I was making and selling these remote control systems. So he knew that I could design and make equipment for broadcast, and I knew broadcasting. And so I said, yeah, I suppose I could do that. He said, how much do you think it would cost? And I thought, well, I think I could do it for $7,000. He says, okay.
That's a lot of money.
Well, yeah, then it was. So he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a checkbook. And he wrote me a check for $7,000.
Wow.
And I said, Dexter, what if I don't want to build it? He says, then don't cash the check. And after carrying the check around for a week, the idea sounded better and better, and that led to the first automation system.
Then in 1956, using his remote control system, he supervised the installation of the first radio automation system at KGEE in Bakersfield, California, which makes him the founding father of radio station automation.
The first one was with this jukebox kind of thing, playing 45 RPM records, station breaks on one tape and commercials on another tape. It had different tapes that automatically intermixed on the air all night long. And that was the beginning of automation. This system was programmed with a series of switches that said, in effect, okay, you play music from this record, then when it goes silent, it automatically switches to the next music, whatever the switches were set for, then automatically switch to a tape, then automatically switch to another record, more music, and then at the end of the quarter hour, whenever that happened, when that song ended, it would start another quarter hour. So it was a very, very simple system. Each tape was an hour long. It would stop when it heard silence. Later, we thought, oh, we could improve on this, and so we started using 25 hertz tones to make it faster, and automation kind of moved into its own. It became a much smoother operation. And then after it worked, I thought, gee, maybe I could make another one. And then I put that system into a trailer and started hauling it around and showing people that it really worked, different radio stations and stuff. And they thought it was kind of fun, and they started buying them. Then I bought a motorhome, and I put an automation system in a motorhome, and that showed it off very nicely. It was fascinating because at that point in history, there were 3 companies selling broadcast equipment to radio stations. It was Collins Radio, Gates Radio, which later became Harris, and RCA. They didn't have any automation, and they wound up selling my automation system to their customers. And I sold a lot of them directly, but nobody else was in the business for more than 5 years. And then other companies started to get into the business. We had reel-to-reel, open-reel tape. We introduced cartridges, and the cartridge came from the old, what was it, 8-track. We got a little fancier. We wanted to be able to give the time. And so we developed a system that would have all of the minutes, the time announcements for the entire day. We had all of the odd minutes on one big cartridge, and another one even. On one cartridge, the voice would say, the time now is 14 minutes after, and the other one, the time now is 15 minutes after, and so forth. And so with these tapes rotating, anytime it called for a time announcement, it would play the appropriate one. So we got a little fancier and a little fancier, but still it was then reel-to-reel tape and cartridge for time, and basically music like a jukebox. It was a very, very, very simple device, with no computer involved. I don't think you would call it a computer.
Show the camera the picture.
Let me see if I can bring the picture up.
Here's the wide version. To Steve Jobs.
It happened in Reno one time at the radio station that I owned, when the tape started to play the time signals and it didn't sense the silence. And so on the air, as I was driving into Reno, I heard my radio station say, "The time now is 10:34. The time now is 10:36. The time now is 10, and on and on and on." Very embarrassing, but those things happen.
Okay, so what are you looking at? Explain.
I'm getting the emails,
Pictures that Kevin
the pictures from Kevin with pictures that he's taking of me looking like
he's tired.
Perhaps
Perhaps you got up at 4 o'clock.
I got up at 4 o'clock and I'm relaxing
And enjoying
and
and waiting for
But
dessert.
he
Imbibing.
went all the way to New York and back and other places.
I know.
And I made another special system that was very simple, where the music played for a classical music station. It would play it from LPs, 33 1/3 RPM LPs. Then one day, Gordon McClendon, who was then and became a very, very well-known broadcaster, came to me and said, "Paul, we want to make an automation system, but you're doing it all wrong. The music has to be on tape." I said, "Music on tape?" He said, "Yeah." And he explained their idea was to have different reels of tape with different musical selections on each one, and then intermixing between them. And so that was the first time we made systems that would have the music on tape, as well as the announcements on tape. That could have been around 1960 or in the early 60s. There were stations that decided they wanted to have a DJ sound, and so they would have a good DJ do the intros to the music. And so you had what sounded, if they did it well, the DJ would introduce the record would play, and so forth. The announcers were not necessarily overly friendly sometimes to me, and I tried to explain to them that if they enjoyed sitting waiting for a 3-minute record to play before they could open their mouth, I didn't think so. But if they were really good, they could do an 8-hour show in an hour and have it really sound good. And many of them did.
From out of a cave at the foot of Sunset Cliffs, the thundering hoofbeats don't pound. For in our last episode, the Rangers' trusty stallion, Sylvia, was stolen by the sinister, rotten-to-the-core bad guy, Panama Red, who fled with Sylvia in a cleverly disguised panel truck. The ever-alert ranger and Indian tracked the truck to a secluded section of Ocean Beach, where the troubled twosome had surrounded a dwelling suspected of housing the horse and the dreaded Panama Red. With searchlights probing the premises, we hear the OB Ranger say,
"Fire out, Groovy, and out of sight, Panama Red. This is OB Ranger speaking."
Well, when we listen to XHIS and XHRS,
Yeah, his and hers were stations I owned.
and those were automated,
Oh, of course.
music was on reel-to-reel tapes.
We started to do something then that was a little different. We actually used some cassettes. I tried to develop a broadcast quality cassette, and it wasn't quite as good maybe as open reel-to-reel, but these systems that were played automatically south of the border, it's broadcast up to San Diego and Los Angeles, were operated by operators. We would radio down to them and tell them about something that was going wrong on the broadcast. But his and hers, and also Big Country Express, there were 3 radio stations that were mine at that point that were kind of fun.
Well, I had an OB Ranger beach towel from that period.
The OB Ranger, when I started these radio stations in San Diego, broadcasting from Tijuana, his and hers, and Big Country Express, I hired 2 guys. They were extremely talented, but they came up with these ideas, like the OB Ranger.
Whoa, big fellow. All right, Indian, it's time to swing into action. That house there with the burlap curtains in the windows and the peace sign on the door?
Yeah.
We're going in. Remember what to do?
Yes, Key.
Key?
That's short for Kimosabe.
Well, don't use that word down here. They tell me it means something else in Ocean Beach.
Sorry.
Now, let's go. Now, get your mask in place. Remember, when we get to the door, pretend you're one of them. And when the door opens, start sniffing for any pungent odor.
You forget, Kimosabe. Indian have good nose, can sniff out Hoss Cartwright in buffalo herd, and can also...
Okay. Here we are. Now, I'll knock.
Hey, what's happening, man?
Far out, groovy, and out of sight. I am the O.B. Ranger.
Somehow, I not think we fool them.
You're right, Indian. You stay here while I run back to my horse Sylvia and get the department manual on hippie terminology out of the saddlebags. I'll be right back.
Will the OB Ranger and Indian get out of this tight spot? Will the manual of hippie terminology save the day? Don't miss the next exciting chapter of the OB Ranger.
Hi-yo, Sylvia, and away!
There was nothing on the air like that at that time. Now, they would record these bits, and then we would send them down to Tijuana, and they would be played in this automated system, but it was great fun. They were 100,000 watts to the north FM. I think it started around the turn of around the 70s, as I recall. We really targeted the younger crowd. We were number 1, 18 to 34. Basically, it was good programming. I mean, people were listening to us, and so we were really we were excellent competition. Not only did we have like 100,000 watts of FM, but we were on top of a mountain in Tijuana that covered San Diego better than you could cover from any place in San Diego. With FM, it's not, power is important, but with AM, you want to have a radio station down low by the salt water. With FM, you want to have a station as high as you can get it, because it's line of sight. So we, from our little mountaintop in Tijuana, we covered San Diego, pretty much up to LA.
Tune in for the next bombastic episode of the OB Ranger. Hi-yo, Sylvia, away!
I think that would be excellent with dessert.
That would go for dessert.
It would, yes. Okay, champagne
We'll
goes.
do it.
Champagne goes with anything.
Which one is it?
Domaine, Chandon.
Two things happened simultaneously at the same time. One, alternative programming became not only feasible, but very, very popular. And the fact that you could do it with automation helped me sell automation systems. And the more stations that were on the air, the more alternative music was available to them. When I first got into radio, there were maybe a few hundred radio stations in the United States. And by the time we were automating radio stations, there were, I don't know how many, thousands of radio stations. And now, I suppose there are tens of thousands. So it just, FM, AM also, just proliferated. Well, FM, prior to World War II, FM was in the 44 megahertz range. And following World War II, it moved up to the present range of frequencies where it is, and then it grew. There were many, many radio stations, many FMs, and then many more AMs too.
This is KCTC, 19 Augustine, with more music that'll make you feel good. Enjoy from Salt 96 FM.
What we're looking at here is the main control console for the Schafer digital system. While it's impressive to look at, the fact is that most of the time there is very little human action around this main console. But actual operation of the system takes place on a live basis in live disc jockey rooms or studios. About the only time that anyone is close to this one is to load the floppy disk for the next day's programming. While the machines behind me are functioning, they're functioning and being driven by the database that's input through floppy disk. The basic music library that we have in here exceeds 4,000 cuts. And what we're really doing is on a database basis addressing any one of those cuts we want so that we can program exactly what we want and where. And the operators don't have to carry tape around, don't have to change reels, don't have to drop cartridges on the floor and all the things that we have been accustomed to. After the fact, what you probably heard there was logging going off. The quality of the sound reproduction from the digital system is absolutely outstanding using the 44.1 sampling rate. It's not going to get any better than this at that sampling rate. So this is the area for Live Assist, and we have two different control rooms that have nothing more than the monitor and the keyboard extension in them, and the operators really have no need to access the actual digital equipment itself. They simply have to punch a button to get what they want instantly. They haven't quite gotten used to the fact that the written log is a useless piece of paper and that all of the material that they need is on the screen in front of them. As a matter of fact, the screen in front of them has much more information than they would generally need.
Then automated stations were basically music stations. Gordon McClendon, he tried many things. He was a pioneer in trying new programs. Well, as an example, in LA, for a while, he put on a radio station that was all want ads. K-Ads in Los Angeles. Coast was one of his stations, and he had stations in other cities too. But automation helped make it possible for radio stations to program any kind of music profitably.
Amor y gozarlos. You do it too fast.
Salud besitos, amor besitos,
Besitos
y
y
tiempo
amor.
para gozarlos.
Yeah, but I have to say it slow.
Oh,
I'm just learning.
sometimes slower is better.
Yes, sometimes slower is much better.
I remember being delightfully surprised when we had sold 1,000 automation systems all over the world, but mostly in the US. So automation helped. Didn't hurt me either.
Ultimately, over 1,000 Schafer automation systems were installed in AM and FM stations all over the world, and Paul Schafer became a preeminent expert in the field. He was awarded a patent for the random access spotlight locator. He authored a chapter in the 1960 5th edition of the NAB Engineering Handbook on remote control of broadcast stations. He founded Schafer International in 1969 and subsequently Schafer Digital Project, in 1986.
The Schafer DAPS 800 is a system in which we record up to 10 hours of music on a beta cassette. We play the songs in these 8 VCRs, 80 hours of music, in any order we want. We play the commercials from 2 VCRs, downloading to a hard disk so we can have instant access to all of the short events. We have everything, the whole library in the radio station in the system. We can play everything that we want to on the air in any order we want. And it's all programmed by the computer. We can set up to program up to 2 weeks if we want.
Magic 103.
Well, I'd like to say happy birthday to Mr. Schafer. There you go, sir. These are, we make our own truffles. They're Ghirardelli chocolate, a little bit Kahlua, and chocolate sprinkles.
I'm the father of automation, but nobody's old enough to remember that anymore. I don't care. I enjoyed every minute of it.
And for the linchpin of evidence of his overachieving habits, to say that he's a regular attendee at NAB conventions would be a vast understatement. He has been in attendance at every NAB convention since 1953, this year being his 50th consecutive year of doing so. Paul, on behalf of the National Association of Broadcasters and your colleagues in the radio industry, I'm pleased to present the NAB Radio Engineering Achievement Award to you in commemoration of your outstanding career. Congratulations, Paul.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Paul.
Mr. Schafer.
Happy birthday to you. Yay!
Well, to say that these 60 years have flown by would be a masterpiece of understatement. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you. Now I run my company, Schafer International, from my home office in Bonita, California, San Diego area. My winter office is my motorhome parked on my beach in Mazatlan, Mexico, where I step out of the door into the sand that close to the high tide mark.